right, so our next step before we put this back into our actual base here is I want to connect the negative pigtail of the 9-volt adapter. Okay, so you can get away with not cutting this wire and stripping it so it's not as long, and that puts excess wires into the actual base. I'm going to go ahead and cut it and strip it, just so there's less in there. So you do need a good amount of, I'd say about 2 inches of this LED pigtail so you can actually position your battery in there. Okay, so what I do is I cut this in half. So you can see here that's half. I'm just going to cut it. If you've never used a wire strippers before, you want to look at the gauge, okay, which is on here. So this is 26, 24, 22, 20. That refers to the gauge of the wire. I believe this is 24 gauge, so I'm going to put it in the 24 gauge. Okay, about 1/4 of an inch in there, and then I'm going to pull it out. What it does is that strips the coating off, so now I can solder this to it. Okay, so I'm actually going to apply a thin coat of solder onto this wire. That is called tinning the wire, and what that does is this takes this stranded wire, and again it solidifies it, so heat it up. It doesn't take much just to get a coating on it. Okay, and that's going to make soldering it easier to the other wire when I do my lap solder. And it's also going to take those strands and make them a solid wire. So I want to do the same thing here. I want to put a little bit of a loop in here. Okay, this again is just going to help with connecting these. Just close that a little bit. And this makes it easier when you're working by yourself. If you do have somebody helping you, or holding it, it does make it a lot easier. But that loop, now I'm able to position this in here so that it's, lapped like I want it. And then I can come in here with my solder, heat it up, add solder. Okay, and sometimes you need to, work that solder in a little bit. Oops, I had it and then I lost it. The key to soldering is you don't want to apply excessive heat to it. Okay, that can damage the electrical components. Okay, I do have a little bit of solder right here. I'm just gonna clean off. Okay, so now again that is connected. So as we stated in our drawing a series circuit, we have all of our electrical components in line. So I have my negative power going through my resistor, going through my first LED, second LED, and third LED. Now what we're going to do is we're going to close this circuit. Okay, in electrical terminology, close means turn on or turn off. So open is on. So I'm going to take my switch and press it. When I press it down, it's going to close the circuit, which is going to turn everything on. When I release it, it's going to press it on or turn it off. So I'm going to release this or unscrew this plastic nut that's on here. Okay, I don't need that yet. Now, one of the biggest mistakes people do is they solder all this up together. Now, if I solder this together, all of my components are not going to go through my hole. So this is where it's going to get to be a little bit of a tight work or a squeeze, but we're going to make it fit. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to took that nut off, I'm going to put my LED or my push button into my base. Okay, and I like to position the terminals on the push button in this orientation so I can easily solder components to it. I'm going to go ahead and take the nut, place it on the back, okay, and then thread it in. Get it snug. It is okay to press this button down as you're tightening that nut. So that push button is now set in place. So the next thing I want to do is I want to place the LEDs that I've been working on in my temporary soldering base. I'm going to pull them out carefully. Okay, so I have my almost completed circuit. I'm going to take it. Now I'm going to place them in these holes. Now the holes matched on the cardboard, identical to the holes that are in your base. You just need to squeeze them in. And you're going to press them down. What you want to make sure is that the wires or the leads that are on these LEDs, they are pressed flat against your 3D printed base. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your long lead of your LED and you're going to touch it to the switch. Okay, we're going to solder those components on. So I have it touching here, right? And now I'm just going to solder it. There is a little bit of a hole inside these terminals on the push buttons. If you can get it into that hole, that'd be better. But it is a little bit difficult doing so in this confined area. The solder is going to be more than strong enough to hold those two components together once it's in place, once it's soldered. Okay. So again, I'm going to take my iron, I'm going to heat up the component. So I'm going to heat up that lead, put a little solder in. Okay, so it gets a nice strong connection. Now with these switches, they are plastic. So if you heat up the terminal on there too much, it's actually going to melt the inside the switch, which could be problematic. So again, make sure that before you solder, that your electrical component is right next to the terminal. Apply a little bit of heat and then apply solder. Okay, I can tell you from experience, if you apply too much heat, you're gonna jeopardize your switch. Okay, so this is just about to get into place here. What I'm gonna do is I just wanna kind of lay out where my battery is going to be going, okay, and where my terminal is going to be going. It doesn't matter which side it goes into. I am going to put it on this side here, so it gives me a little bit more room to tuck wires in. And then I'm going to solder my red wire on. So if you want to, again, I'm just laying this out. If you want to trim back an inch on your red wire, you can, and I will, just so it's, again, fits a little bit better. Again, line up it with the 24 gauge, about 1/4 of an inch. Okay, you want that. I am going to tin this again. So apply a little bit of solder, a little bit of heat, a little bit of solder, tin that wire. I don't know if I mentioned this when I was wiring the first lead of the long lead of my LED to the switch. It doesn't matter which terminal it goes into. There is no polarity to a switch. I just put it on the left side here to give myself room to put this one on the right side. So this one, I do actually have the ability to place the lead through that terminal hole. Okay, so that I put a little bit of a bend in here. Right, it's a little bit of like a hook. So we'll place it in here. Okay, and before I solder it, I'm just going to squeeze that down. That's going to make a much strong connection, especially for that red wire that's going to be moving constantly as I take in and out the battery. That LED wire is not going to be moving as much because it's in there and the switch isn't moving. So I'm going to apply heat, then apply solder. Doesn't take much. Once you apply the solder, let it cool. Then pull on the wire, make sure it is connected. Okay, so one thing I want you to be extra sure of is that there is no wires connecting between or bridging that switch. That would cause a short and bypass the switch, so we don't want to do that. Now we're ready to place our battery in. So we're going to take our battery, plug it into our, and I can go ahead and kill the lights here. Press that and it does turn on. Okay, so it did work properly. Go ahead and turn the lights back on here. If it didn't work properly, a couple things you need to check. You need to check all of your electrical connections. Make sure that everything's tight, that there's no gaps. The next most common mistake is that your LEDs are not put in the right order. So you don't have the long touching the short, right? You might have one that's mistakenly in the wrong orientation, or you don't have the positive, right? This was the positive end, or the long end of my LED was on the left. I have that going to the positive, right? The negative goes to the short end goes to the negative. So those are the most common mistakes that I see. So then go ahead and place your battery in there. It fits nice and tight. Okay, tuck your wires in. Okay, now we're gonna put the cover on. So So you're going to take your clear cover, place it in. Again, make sure that all your wires are tucked away nice and neat, that nothing's touching so we don't get a short by by mistake. You're going to take your first screw, get it started. The kit does come with an Allen key, so get it started. You might have to press down a little bit as you secure these in. Your second one in. Okay, as you notice, I'm not tightening this all the way before I do all four, because you want to line up all your holes. So again, I'm pressing down a little bit. All four are going to get pressed in before I tighten them. Okay, once you have them all in place, you can flip it over. Okay, we'll take our test piece of acrylic and place it in. Hit the lights. There you have it, folks. The next tutorial will be going over how to actually get your custom image on the piece of acrylic, okay, using the Lightburn software. But the LED does work, okay, and it's ready to